So Liliesleaf Farm Museum, a national heritage site which during Apartheid was the secret headquarters of the ANC, has shut down after running out of money. The museum's CEO Nicholas Wolpe says the museum closed down indefinitely on Tuesday. He will join us in just a moment, but we're also in conversation with Unathi Sonwabile Henama, a tourism academic from the Tshwane University of Technology. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Unathi, what are your reactions to this, the closure of Liliesleaf Farm, especially because of lack of funding?
It's quite disappointing that Liliesleaf is closing down. I think if you reflect on the tapestry of heritage sites in South Africa, you find that Liliesleaf is one of the best preserved. I mean, it's got a world-class, preservation of the history. It's got a great multimedia room and an interpretation center where we are able to reflect on the historical events that happened. It also has got that beautiful truck which used to be used to transmit arms into South Africa. So what I can basically say is that it is quite disappointing that we had to find ourselves in this situation where Liliesleaf is closing down, considering how important it is within our cultural heritage. I mean, if you look at Robben Island, if you look at the arrest of Nelson Mandela, in Howick and KZN, all of this is interlinked with the entire struggle for liberation. So this is not just another attraction. It is at the center which led to the Rivonia trial and what basically led to international prominence for a place such as Robben Island.
But why do you think as a society we find ourselves in this situation? Are we doing enough for our part to preserve national heritage sites?
I think as South Africans, we don't consume enough of our heritage. I think if you can reflect, you find that even at our heritage sites, you find a situation where there are more international clientele that come and consume what is local without us being the leaders in consuming our heritage. So all over the world, you find that local citizens must play a leading role in being the primary suppliers of tourists and visitors to heritage sites. But I think it's also a reflection upon us as a people. And when I say as a people, I'm including government agencies and us within our homes and families and family units as to, we have to ask these fundamental questions. Have we visited the top 100 heritage attractions in South Africa? And since Heritage Month, I think that might be the beginning of that conversation, that we need to visit heritage sites so that as part of nation building, we're able to reflect on lessons can be learned when you visit these various heritage sites, which are all over the country.
But I think to some extent it has to do with the environment. There must be a sense of relatability. So how do we make these sites relevant to the youth of today across class and race structures? How do we make sure that they understand the importance thereof, especially if they can't find an anchor in them? I mean, if you listen to some of the conversations, people will talk about the Apartheid era and say, I wasn't there, etc., etc. So it has nothing to do with me.
I agree. The integration of technology, the curatorship of the experience so that younger people are able to relate is very, very important. And that is why I feel a personal pain with what happens to Liliesleaf, because I think it provides the ultimate model on how a museum is supposed to be created. Because it's not just a museum, it is an interpretation center. It has a restaurant where you can be able to sit down and have a meal or have a cool drink or have tea or coffee. So I believe it becomes the model, because I mean, if you can go to the Sharpeville Memorial, it's completely something else. If you go to the memorial of the ANC in Bloemfontein, it's completely something else. So this one became the ultimate model upon which all of us who are obviously related to heritage always seek to say, this is the example.
So let's just look at public-private partnerships, how do we make them better? And is it all in the management of small to medium enterprises?
Management and governance are obviously fundamental principles to ensure that there's a success of heritage site. But I always believe that a public-private partnerships can actually exist and help, especially those publicly owned heritage sites, where you find government might not have the expertise, number one, and number two, you find that government might have limited financial resources in trying to develop them. So I believe public-private partnerships are the way to go. And so I need to indicate that in the year 1996, already there was an existing PPP for tourism, which was the first to be created in South Africa. So I think the legislative framework is there. I think what we must obviously do is to externalize that. And the crisis around Liliesleaf, I think, provides an opportunity for us as a nation to reflect on how we could obviously develop other heritage sites in South Africa, obviously looking at international best practice.
Okay, it's such a pity because we were hoping that Nicholas Wolpe will join us, the CEO of Liliesleaf Farm. He has, for instance, said he's disappointed with Gauteng and national governments for not assisting with keeping the museum open. He's also said there hasn't been any word from the ANC, the Departments of Arts, Culture and Sports. And yet the Minister of Arts and Culture has retorted back that Liliesleaf needs to account for the money that's being given to them. I'm not sure if it's 8.1 million or billion, but how is that relationship managed going forward, as you say, looking at other heritage sites that find themselves in dire straits because of mismanagement?
The Wolpe is joining us right now. I think he might be better placed to answer that.
There he is. Okay. So,
yes.
Mr. Wolpe, I'm not sure if you heard anything that I was saying, but you were decrying the lack of funding and communications from both the national and Gauteng governments, the Department of Arts, Culture and Sports. But let's listen to this. I want you to listen to what the minister was saying earlier on. Let's see if we can bring up that soundbite.
The only thing we're asking from Liliesleaf is that the 8.1 million rands we funded, we gave them, they must account for them. PFMA does not allow government to continuously fund an institution if there is no accountability.
All right. So, Mr. Wolpe, do you agree with the figures, and how do you answer to that question?
Tapiso, thank you very much for having me on the show this evening. I appreciate it. Now, with regard to that, let me just put this into context. I think it's very important. In 2015, Liliesleaf signed an MOU for 9 million for infrastructure upgrade. What I would like to say, there was always this understanding with the department that the money would actually be used for operational expenditure. So it was very clear, very transparent, and very open about how this money was being used. In December 2015, we submitted a financial report and a narrative setting out exactly how this money had been spent. Therefore, for the minister to say that we have not accounted for the money is in some respects misleading. What I will say, though, and what I will agree, is if you turned around and said, well, yes, you may have accounted for how the money was spent, but the money was not spent on what you signed the MOU on. That I agree with. So there are two issues here that need to be addressed. One is you did not spend the money according to the MOU, which we have never denied, and we have been open and transparent. But there's always been that understanding that the purpose of the fund were for operational purposes. And I don't want to get into the detail about, well, why was it done that way? I think the issue is, was the money accounted for?
Okay.
Did Liliesleaf
So, Mr.
account
Wolpe, I
for
think
how the
there
money...
is a very important thing that you're raising, and he's raising. It was saying that it went against the PFMA, and we know that accounting officers have stringent guidelines which have to be followed, and you are at the same time lamenting the lack of funding. So there has to be an accountability that makes it possible for government to help. So what do you think needs changing? Why did you find yourself in the situation that you find yourselves in?
Okay, let's go back again, and before I get on to talking about the issue of accountability and what needs to be changed. I think the important thing is we have always struggled with the Department of Arts and Culture to secure funding. They've always indicated and argued that because we are not a cultural institution, and being not declared a cultural institution, we are not able to gain access to funding from the department. I think that's a very important point that we must start with. Now, just before going further about the question of what needs to change, the issue of accountability and the issue of accounting with regard to the PFMA, I mean, actually, with all due respect, non-government departments are not required to subscribe to the PFMA. It only applies to government entities. We must account, though. I'm not saying we shouldn't account for the money. We have accounted for the money, and we have always accounted for the money. But the question that you have raised about what needs to be changed also comes into the fact that there is this kind of reluctance by the Department of Arts and Culture to fund entities which are not cultural institutions, entities which are independent. And they have fallen back on this time and again, year after year, arguing that because Liliesleaf is not a cultural institution, we are not entitled to funding, which is actually also misleading and incorrect, because there is the Cultural Promotions Act. Before I go on to explain what that is, what I would like to also raise and say, well, if we are not entitled to funding from the Department of Arts and Culture, how did they justify giving Liliesleaf 61.5 million rand over the last 19 and a half years? Okay. They need to explain that.
All right. So Nabile, just looking forward, we know that heritage sites form part of the tourism industry. So how can government do its best to boost the sector within the overall economic growth strategy? We're talking here about the impact of COVID-19, but just also some of the issues that Nicholas was just raising.
I think when the tourists come, especially international tourists, when they come here, they consume our wine, our beaches, the big five, then they want to know the South African story. And I think more can be done in promoting our lot of cultural heritage sites. And obviously that is a collaboration between national government and the different provincial authorities in tourism, especially considering that September is both Heritage and Tourism Month. I think with a lot of shows going around, a lot of social media influencers going with the different tourism agencies, I think it's an opportunity for us to also highlight the need to gaze on a lot of these heritage sites so that we can promote them, so that people know about them, so that they can visit them.
Nicholas, you mentioned that you are posting events, organizing for Quicket's website in order to help raise funding. But talk to me about the challenges that you face, this in terms of heritage site management and actually drawing investors. You spoke about the private sector. Were they buying it?
Before I actually go on to address that, I would like to address an issue which concerns me. And that issue is that we seem to first and foremost focus on the economic importance of the cultural sector. And that is incorrect. First and foremost, our priority should be to protect, preserve, and ensure that this sector is protected, that all these institutions are in a space where they are first looking after what I would like to call their core function, and that is preserving the
Nicholas,
essence of what these places.
I'm sorry, because we are running out of time. It is actually an issue that we did address, but because you came on a little later, you missed that, and that's why I'm talking to you about, the challenges of heritage site management.
Well, look, I think, the challenge very simply is that the bottom line is that there are two issues here. Firstly, there is the day-to-day management of the site. Then there is also ensuring that the site gives a proper experience for the visitor to come and experience what this site represents, what this site articulates, and the stories it tells. Now, going back to the first element, the management of the site, that can only be achieved if there is sufficient operational funding to be able to ensure that the site is properly maintained. And in order to maintain a site effectively and properly, we need the financial support of not only the government, but civil society in general. Because why I raised the question earlier, a moment ago, about economics. Sites are not there to make a profit. Our objective and modus operandi is not to make a profit, but to ensure that we preserve the heritage, the history, the culture, and the arts of our country, which is incredibly rich.
So very quickly, can you confirm that the projects division of the museum will still remain operational?
It is remaining operational. We have a number of projects which are currently running because they are separate to the day-to-day running of the site. Those projects, we have been running projects throughout COVID, even during this period of where we have been struggling to maintain and fund the day-to-day operations of Liliesleaf. We have had quite a number of projects on the go. And if I may give you one example of one project, that one project I would like to make reference to is a project with the Swedish Institute and the Swedish Embassy, which involved 9 embassies throughout the African continent to tell the story of Sweden's role in the struggle and a fight to rid the continent of colonialism.
So, Nabila, just to end off, I believe, just when we're talking about it from a global perspective, the World Travel and Tourism Council puts the amount of money earned at 6.9% of Africa's GDP and has supported 24.7 million jobs. So how do we optimize it for South Africa? So it's not a nice to have heritage sites. It's something that helps us keep our heritage, learn from it, but how do we also make sure that it trickles down to keeping people in jobs?
I think the first thing, you find the vast majority of our heritage sites, especially in the Gauteng province, South Africa, are in the city centers. Let's keep the city centers clean, let's keep them safe. Then people will then have a desire to come to the city centers to consume our heritage, because too many of our heritage sites are no-go areas because of where they are located. So I believe that's an easy way to get an easy win, so that when tourists are marketed to visit South Africa, they will put on the itinerary, visit the following attractions, which are predominantly in CBDs and in townships.
Thank you so much to you both. Nicholas Wolpe, CEO of Liliesleaf, and Unathi Sonwabile Henama, tourism academic at Tshwane University of Technology.